Well, hello and welcome to Growing Deeper Daily with Gateway Church. I'm Pastor Michael, and we are starting another week together looking in God's Word. We're going to continue with our daily devotions here through the end of July. We'll take the month of August off to refresh and to get into God's Word deeper on our own. I'll give you some tools to encourage you to do so. Then we look forward to starting back up again in the fall. But for the next several weeks here through the month of July, I want to encourage us each day in the book of Proverbs. Last summer, if you remember, we looked in the book of Psalms together. We talked about the Psalms of Ascent. And during the summertime, when things are a little slow, I like to look into the wisdom literature of God and as well as into the prophetic literature and, the poetic literature of God a little bit more deeply. Last summer, I was spending a lot of time in those Psalms of Ascent. And this summer, I'm spending extra time in the book of Proverbs. This is where I find myself in my reading plan through the Bible. And over the next several weeks, we're going to talk about Proverbs in general, and then we're going to talk about specific Proverbs, little nuggets of wisdom that God gives to us from His Word in the book of Proverbs. I am convinced that if we really read, meditated, and acted upon the Proverbs, we would live extremely differently in this world. The book of Proverbs, the wisdom there makes so much sense when you hear it and when you read it, and it is so difficult to live out. That's why we really need to drench our thoughts, our mind, our actions in the wisdom from this book. Today I want to start off with the first 6 verses, however, of the book of Proverbs that really set out for us the purpose and the benefit of the whole book. Tomorrow we'll talk about living under the fear of the Lord, and then over the next several weeks we'll get into various proverbs that give us encouragement and wisdom in life. But today I want to read the first several verses for us and to demonstrate for us several of the benefits, some of the benefits of wisdom for us. This is in verse 2. To know wisdom and instruction, to understand the words of insight, to receive instruction in wise dealing, in righteousness, justice, and equity, to give prudence to the simple, knowledge and discretion to youth. Let the wise hear and increase in learning, and the one who understands obtain guidance, to understand a proverb and a saying, the words of the wise and their riddles. There's many benefits here of wisdom laid out for us by the author. Just a few that I want to highlight for us. First of all, we see that it's very practical. To receive instruction in wise dealings. In other words, your day-to-day actions and interactions, that you need wisdom in how to act. Just this morning I was talking with somebody and praying with them, encouraging them, and they were telling me of an individual in their life who every time they are faced with a challenge, they seem to choose the way of folly. In other words, they seem to choose the way that gives them immediate gratification in the moment. An action that does not take into account the long-term consequences. And they said, it's frustrating to try to make decisions with someone who does not value wisdom. And this is why the book of Proverbs, it helps us with practical dealings. How do we deal with the day-to-day challenges and issues in ways that are wise? It's important for us to define that term. I've talked about it a lot. We had a sermon series earlier on in our year in the book of Proverbs. But wisdom is this idea of chokhmah in Hebrew. It's skill and art. It's skillfulness in the art of godly living. That there takes, yes, the attainment of practical skills, and yet there's an artistic way in which we get to live it out in this world. And we look into the Proverbs. We seek to be people of wisdom, to practically deal wisely. Secondly, we see that we do so in righteousness, justice, and in equity. I love that about the Proverbs. It's about doing so in a moral and just way. There are moral implications for how we live in the world. That wisdom is not just practical in order to be wise and get things done for yourself, but to live morally, to live with equity and righteousness and justice. See, that's the purpose. It's a moral transformation of our life. We submit to the wisdom of God in order to live that way in this world, that people might see a difference in our character. and the difference in the way we treat people that are disadvantaged, a way that we long for and desire to see justice in our world. That's a benefit of wisdom. It's practical, it's moral. Thirdly, we see to give prudence to the simple and knowledge and discretion to the youth. It is educational for those that are less wise, for the youth, even for the simple. It's educational. As a young child, as a youth, we have yet much to learn. For those that are simple, they have yet much to learn. The simple here in Proverbs is this idea of the individual that does not seek after and know wisdom. If they will give their ears, they will learn prudence and seek to be wise in this world. It's educational for us. None of us have arrived. All of us in some areas of our life act simply and youthfully. And so wisdom, educational. Fourth here, we see that let the wise hear and increase in learning. It's intellectual. Even the wise can grow wiser, can increase in learning. It's an intellectual pursuit as well. None of us have arrived. None of us have made it. Wisdom helps us to discern and live in an intellectual way in this world that is inclined and transformed by the truth of God. So, practical, moral, educational, intellectual, and lastly, it allows us to live a curious life. I love that. Look what it says here. To understand a proverb and a saying, the words of the wise and their riddles. Wisdom enables us to probe and to look and to be curious. You know, one of the greatest challenges or obstacles to overcome in our spiritual growth, something that I see stunt people in their spiritual journey, is a lack of curiosity. Thinking that I have figured it all out. Thinking that the black and white answers that I have come accustomed to accepting in my life are all that I need moving forward. I think the Proverbs remind us that we are to seek and to be curious, to probe even deeper about how we might learn and grow and know the Lord, to understand wisdom, to seek out its riddles. We live in a wonderfully, beautifully complex and exciting world, and God calls us to seek out how to live in it. When we seek wisdom like this, wisdom from God, we get to live a life that's practical, moral, educational, intellectual, and curious. In a life that's truly a life of skill in the art of godly living. That's what Proverbs is all about. So join me these next couple weeks together and ask God to give you that curious mind, that pursuit for intellectual excellence, that desire to be morally and practically upright in your life. When we do, we find that to be the fulfilling life that God offers. Well, God bless you, church. Thank you for joining me today on a Monday. I look forward to getting in God's Word together with you this week. I'll see you tomorrow.